Like before, we are going to start with the sloka from the last class. So recite the sloka.
Nainam chindanti shashrani, nainam dahati pavakaha, na chainam kedayantyapo, na shoshayati marutaha.
Good. The meaning?
Weapons do not cut the soul, fires do not burn it, water does not wet it, and wind cannot dry it.
Okay, good.
The whole idea is that no element can destroy the soul. Nothing can destroy the soul.
Yeah, that's right. Nothing can destroy the soul. What can destroy the soul? What can cause harm to the soul? Yourself. Only you can cause harm to yourself. No one else, nothing else can harm your soul. Right? So that is what we learned in last session. So what is the worst thing that can happen to one's life? What is the worst thing that can happen to one's life?
Getting it in the wrong way.
Sorry, getting into? Getting into a bad habit? Anything worse than that?
Getting into a bad habit.
Okay, getting into a bad habit. Anything else?
Maybe not improving.
Not improving? Okay, anything else?
Sure.
What is the worst thing that can happen to life? What is the opposite of life?
Okay?
Right. The worst thing that can happen to life is for it to end. Right? That is the worst thing. Now, when we, what are less worse things? Say like bad habits. What is more worse than getting into a bad habit?
Getting into a bad repeated habit.
Okay. Anything else? In a different way?
Making impressions.
No, don't think so much. Don't go into the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita. Just say, what is worse than getting into a bad habit? Or simple things. What is one of the something that bad that can happen to somebody? What is something bad that can happen? Losing one's toy, probably, for the small children, losing a toy. And what is worse than that?
Disappointing.
Getting the life to end.
Yeah, that's the worst thing, right? So let us talk in simple terms. What are some of the bad things? So the bad things could be losing a toy for the children, right? Losing a toy. The other, hmm? Losing a game. Then some other thing that can happen is ill health, right? Suppose you are sick and you are not able to go to school, right? So these are all bad things that can happen. Now, if you do not worry about the more worse things, will you worry about the less worse things? Suppose you get into the habit of not worrying about becoming ill. You have fever, you have headache, you cry and all that. Suppose that's what happens, right? When you're ill. Now, suppose you do not worry about it at all. Do you think the child is going to worry about the toy, losing the toy? No. So if you do not worry about the worst things, you will not worry about things which are less worse, right?
Right.
So the worst thing that can happen to one's life is death, right? Now, if you don't worry about death, will you worry about anything else?
No.
So that is the reason why Bhagavad Gita talks about life and death. Those are really big things. Now, Krishna is asking Arjuna not to worry about death. When we don't worry about death, which is the worst thing that can happen to life, we will never worry about anything else, right? So, Bhagavad Gita starts with things, big things like life, death, rebirth, and all that stuff. So that if we don't,
I think I know why death is the worst of life. Because death is the opposite of life.
yeah, that's right. If the life ends there, right? So that's the worst thing that can happen to life. What can be worse than that? So if
When
you don't,
Yama takes the life away,
yeah, and if
so
you
it's
don't,
like Yama takes his
right, Yama takes a
one
life.
life.
Yeah. So the god of death, Yama, can take the life away. So that's the worst thing that can happen. If we understand, develop the right perspective about these big things, the worst things that can happen, we will automatically be correct about the smaller things, right? When you develop the right attitude for bigger things, the smaller things automatically fall in place, right? So if you learn how to behave when you are ill, when you are in pain, you'll automatically know how to behave well when a friend of yours snatches the toy from you, right? So that is why um, Lord Krishna talks about these big things. So if you know, if you have the right attitude towards death and life and all these big things, you will automatically have the right attitude for the smaller things in life, right? You get the idea? Now, on the other hand, what is something that is most taken for granted? You know what is the meaning of taking for granted, right?
Life?
Yeah, that's a good answer. Life is often taken for granted. We don't care for life, right? Uh, so that is at a little philosophical level, but we do care for life, right? We don't want to end the life to end, right? So we do care for life, but there is something that we take for completely granted. What could that be?
And
Your parents, your families, you still do not completely take them for granted, right? Like you cannot say, "Oh, mommy, I don't care." You cannot say that, right? Because you depend on them so much. There's something else that you do not pay attention at all. What is that? School, you do pay some attention, right?
yeah,
Something that happens automatically that you do not even need to pay attention.
the world around you.
You pay a lot of attention. That is the problem. But there's something that we do not pay attention at all. Something we do every second, but we don't care at all.
Breathe.
Right. Right, we take it for granted, right? We never care for that. In fact, a lot of sadness is because of breath. When you breathe less, you are automatically sad. You just observe. When you are sad, you will breathe less. When you are happy, you breathe more. Like when you are jogging, you breathe more. When you are happy, right? And when you are laughing, you breathe more, right? This is all automatic. You take it for so granted every second. So Just like if you know the right attitude to the worst thing in life, you automatically get corrected. If you make the most taken for granted thing, the most important thing in life, then can there be anything else more important? Nothing, right? So that is what Lord Buddha did. In the next avatar of Lord Vishnu, which is Lord Buddha, Lord Buddha's meditation technique is based on things that we take for granted, like breath. So what meditation does, in the meditation, what we do is we focus on the breath and make it the most important thing in your life. Focus only on the breath. Your mind wanders. It says, "Oh, this is what happened today. My sister did this to me. Yeah, I forgot to do my homework. Oh man, how am I going to answer my teacher tomorrow? I might lose the points." So all these thoughts come. But as those thoughts keep coming, you should keep on bringing your attention to your breath, right? If you keep on bringing your attention to your breath and make it the most important thing, that's what you do in meditation. Yeah, what is the question?
Yeah,
Oh,
that we do that in meditation.
yeah, so in meditation, what you do is you focus on the breath and observe how the air keeps coming and going into your nostrils. The tip of the nostril, how the air is touching the tip of the nostril is what you are going to focus on. As your mind wanders, you should not force it, but internally there's something called avitthana. Buddha lived 2000 years back, right? More than 2000 years back. So during those days, they used to speak in a language called Pali. It's no longer there. Nobody talks in that language anymore. So they used to talk in a language called Pali, not Sanskrit. So Krishna talked in Sanskrit, but Sanskrit slowly got transformed into Pali during Buddha's time. So in Pali, avitthana means determination. So there are some aspects to meditation. When you go to these meditation camps, they make you practice on each aspect for a few days. I think avitthana comes during the third or fourth day. You will focus that day. You will completely focus on avitthana. That means how to bring back your attention, your mind from wandering thoughts to the focus, to your breath, and make breath the most important thing, right? So when breath, which is most taken for granted, is given the most importance, all other things that we care about become less important. We stop worrying about them. There are two ways. Lord Krishna's way is to develop the right attitude towards the worst thing that can happen. And Lord Buddha's way is to give the most importance to the most taken for granted. The least important aspect of life, which is breath, we take it for granted, make it the most important, right? So both of them achieve the same goal. What is the goal? To make things less important. All worldly matters become less important, right? When you do not even worry about death, everything becomes less important. And when you give most importance to the least uh, considered aspect of life, then everything else becomes less important. You get it? So these are two different ways, but they achieve the same goal. The first way, Krishna's way, is a little bit difficult because it is all theory, right? Whereas Buddha's way is practical. Nobody can fail here. In Krishna's way, many people can fail. People who do not understand Bhagavad Gita can fail. People who do not have the right attitude develop the right attitude can fail, who are not good at learning can fail. But with Buddha's technique, everyone, even the uneducated people, anyone can succeed. Meditation is open to anyone. Because what are you doing? You just focus on your breath and practice, practice, practice for 3 months. Those days it was 3 months. These days it is for 11 days. You keep on practicing without doing anything else. You automatically master it. Right? Then everything else looks so easy and things keep happening. Right? So see how Lord Buddha and Krishna are so related. They taught the same thing, the right attitude towards life, but the ways are totally different. Buddha's way was meditation, and Krishna's way was knowledge. I mean, 18 yogas, right? So, so those are the two interesting things that. So we'll continue with Bhagavad Gita. The next sloka. Jatasya hidruvo mrityuhu. Here. Jatasya hidruvo mrityuhu. Dhruvam janma mritasya cha. Tasmada pariharyebhe natvam sochitumarhasi. So what does it mean? Certain is death for the born. That means if somebody is born, he or she has to die. And certain is birth for the dead. So somebody is dead, they are born again. Right? Therefore, over the inevitable, you shall not grieve. So something that happens automatically, why do you have to grieve? People who are born will have to die. People who have to die will have to be born. This is automatic. Why do you have to worry? Let us look at each word. Jatasya. So in India, Buddha's tales are called Jataka tales. Jata means birth. So Jatasya means one who has taken his birth. So why are Buddha's tales called as Jataka tales? Because each tale relates, each tale is about, tale means story. Each story relates to Buddha's past lives. Buddha took on many lives and he could, by connecting to his soul through meditation, he could get back the memory of everything that happened in his past life. So each of those lives is a Jataka story. They are called Jataka tales. They are very popular in India. So Jatasya means one who has taken birth. He means certainly, definitely. Dhruvam means a fact. Mrityuhu means death. Dhruvam means it's a fact. Janma. Actually, Dhruvam means certainly. I don't know, for some reason, it's uh, it's given a different meaning here, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Dhruvam typically means certain. Janma means birth. Jatasya Janma. They have the same root. Ja. Ja means birth. Mritasya means of the dead. The sya, if the word ends in sya, it means of the. It's possession, possessive case. In English, you have cases, right? So possessive case in Sanskrit is asya. So mritasya means of the dead. Cha means we came across cha many times.
And
Right. And also. Tasmat means therefore. Apariharye means of that which is unavoidable. You cannot avoid it. Apariharye. Ardhe means in the matter. Na means not. Tvam means you. Sochitam means to lament, to feel sad about something. Sochitam. Shochitam. Arhasi means deserve, right? That's what it means. The meaning is quite clear, right? So what Lord Krishna is saying is birth and death happen automatically. Nobody has control over it. So a lot of things happen automatically, mechanically, right? Like we get up in the morning, go to school, then we spend some time in the school, we come back from the school, we come home, and then we do something else. Are we feeling sad about any of this, which happen automatically? No, right? Because these things happen automatically. You may love time in school. You get to play with your friends and you love a lot the school environment. But you have to come back home anyway. Right? Do you have to, did you try for that? No, we got used to it and we do it. Same thing with life and death, right? Life has to happen and death has to happen. Everyone who is born has to die, and everyone who is dead has to be born. And then in the previous sloka, we learned that there's nothing that can harm us except ourselves, right? If you connect both these slokas, what does it mean? It means that we don't have to worry about anything, right? So there's no point in being sad about anything that happens automatically, right? Use the information to decide what next and move on. That's what we do, right? What next, we decide. So the same thing with our soul. When we are anyway going to die, so we have to make sure that our next life is good. How do you make sure that your next life is good? By developing the right attitude, the right knowledge, the right attitude, and then move on. Right? That's all. So the goal of life should be to keep on improving ourselves. Like I told you in the last class, Mahatma Gandhi once said, learn as if you are going to live forever. And what was the other one? Be happy. I don't remember. But one of the things is learn as if you are going to live forever. Right? So that is the goal. We should keep on learning, improving ourselves. We should improve birth after birth after birth until the soul reaches the God. The Atma reaches the Paramatma. Paramatma is God, right? So until that time, we keep on improving ourselves. So Buddha did that. He recollected. Can you guess how many lives he recollected by going back into his soul? How many Jataka tales? So Buddha could visit 554 of his past lives. He counted 554 past lives. He went back 554 lives and recollected everything. So after 554 lives, Buddha reached the God. Buddha reached the God. That's why all Buddha, Krishna, Rama, they all reached God. Because there was no karma at all associated. There was no balance of karma. They made sure that there are no impressions in the soul. So they reached their Atma reached the Paramatma, the God. So 554 lives, Buddha kept on improving one after the other, one after the other, one after the other. So if you get a chance, try to read the Jataka tales. It's an interesting, they're all interesting tales, stories. So Buddha in many ways can be thought of as a continuation of Lord Krishna. Because both taught the same thing. Only thing is, Krishna's words were not understood by many. Even today, Lord Krishna's words are not understood. First thing is, people don't even pay attention. So the other day, I received a WhatsApp video where there was some advice for the old people. He was saying, uh, don't read Bhagavad Gita. There's no point reading Bhagavad Gita now. If at all you have to read Bhagavad Gita, it should be when you are a small child, so that you can implement all good things in Bhagavad Gita through your life. But if you read Bhagavad Gita when you're almost going to die, what is the point? You lost the chance to improve yourself. So, of course, there is still chance, but most of the chance is lost. If suppose somebody lives for 80 years and he starts studying Bhagavad Gita after he retires, maybe at 67 or 70 years, there's hardly 15, 20 years remaining, right? And there's hardly, because the person is retired, there's very little that the person will do in day-to-day lives. So where is the scope for improvement? There's hardly any scope. Whereas if you read Bhagavad Gita when you're a child, 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, then you have 80 years to improve yourself. Right? So it's very important. So Bhagavad Gita therefore is very important right from the childhood. But still, people do not even read Bhagavad Gita anytime. There are millions and billions of people who do not even know about Bhagavad Gita, who do not read Bhagavad Gita, and even those who read Bhagavad Gita, many do not even understand it in its full depth. And even if somebody understands it in full depth, they are not able to practice it. So it's a very difficult task. Bhagavad Gita is a very big challenge for people. So that is why God had to take another birth as Lord Buddha. And instead of just giving theory, Buddha gave the practice also of how to be a good person. And it's so simple. It is, if Bhagavad Gita is uh, uh, like the whole universe, Buddha's teaching is like a small molecule in the whole universe. It's so easy. Right? Bhagavad Gita, if you have to learn Bhagavad Gita in its full extent, like Arjuna did, it takes lives. For Buddha, it took 554 lives. So it takes many lives to understand Bhagavad Gita in its full extent. But Buddha taught the same thing by simple practice. What is the practice? Meditate. That's it. So he simplified it for us. The God came back and simplified the whole thing for us. Right? Okay, now let us go back to knowledge of machine learning. Okay, we were on this. So test your knowledge of machine learning. What is the feature?
A feature is something that helps classify an object.
Yes. So a feature is an aspect, a description of something. It helps you describe something of data. What is weight?
Weight is the amount of importance given to a feature when classifying a label.
Right. It denotes the amount of importance given to features. Labels.
Labels, labels is classifying something like an object.
Right. Labels are basically classifications in machine learning. And what is the loss function?
The loss function is when to help you understand. When you lose a little, then you feel that you're not getting it, and that makes you work harder and makes you get better results.
Yes, that's good. Loss function works like a lesson. It's like a punishment to people. The algorithm also gets a punishment, and the punishment is given by the loss function. So it's like a feedback. And how about classification?
Classification is when you classify or label something.
Yeah. What is GAN?
GAN is the generative adversarial network.
Good. Generative adversarial network. So there are two components to this. One is the generator and the other is the discriminator. which works like an adversary. It keeps on saying no, 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 like punishes. So what is a generator? What is it?
The generator is the part of machine learning that is making up the images or the guesses for the discriminator to discriminate.
Right, you're right. Generator basically comes up with something fictitious and then gives it to the discriminator for it to classify whether it's real or true. What is a discriminator?
A discriminator discriminates with the discriminator discriminates what the generator does or tells it what's wrong and tells it to improve.
Yeah. And what is overfitting? This is where we stop, I think, right? What is overfitting? So now, how do we learn? We also learn in a similar way. Right? People also learn in a similar way. We look at the features of various things, right? How do we recognize cats? How does a small child recognize cats? He looks at the features of the cat and then gives relative importance to the features. Weight. So the child automatically assigns weights. So this weight is also called as a bias, right? So, for instance, you have 5 friends in your group. You assign, are all the 5 friends equally important to you? Not always, right? You like one friend more than the other, right? So you're assigning a weight to each of these persons. And that weight is typically called as bias. How do you assign the weight? Like you may like one person better, the other person may not like this person at all. Why is that? Because of the bias, because of the background, because of the past lives. Some people like some features, some people do not like those features. So it's all about weights, right? You understand? It's all about weights. From the time we are a small child, we are born, we keep on assigning weights to things. And so like we keep on asking, what is your favorite color? What is your favorite this? It's all about biases and colors and all that stuff. Now, should the weights be more or less in general? Should you give a lot of importance to a lot of things? Or you should give less importance to a lot of things?
The weight should be less so that you don't have a bias.
Right. The weight should be less. So, for instance, you love a toy so much. Now, what happens? If somebody snatches the toy from you, or if you lose a toy,
You get upset.
so you get upset. Why? Because you attach the huge weight to the toy. But if you attach a very small weight to the toy, even if it goes, will you cry?
No.
Yeah. So the weight should always, if you want to be happy, the weight should always be less, right? So the more you think of favorites and dislikes and love and hate and all that stuff, the more the weight will increase. But we want, and that is called as overfitting. In machine learning, giving a lot of weight is called overfitting. So overfitting means you you observed only a few things, right? And you give a lot of importance to those things. Then that is bad. So that's what overfitting does in machine learning. In machine learning, if the algorithm looks at only a few data points and then learns only from the data points by giving a lot of weight to those patterns, then it is overfitting, right? That is called overfitting. So same thing in real life. Now, how do you remove overfitting in real life? How do we reduce weights? What are the ways to reduce weights? How do you give less importance to your toy that you like so much?
Maybe important knowledge.
Right. So when you want to, suppose you draw a line, somebody, actually this used to be an interview question long back. So somebody drew a line, the interviewer drew a line on the whiteboard and then asked the interviewee, without touching the line, make it short. How can you do it? Without touching the line, make this line short. Can you do it?
Well, you could erase it.
No, you cannot change the line. You cannot touch the line at all.
Maybe only look at part of the line.
Look at part of the line. Okay. Anything else? But look, we cannot ask the interviewer to look at part of the line. Right?
We cover up part of the line.
We cannot touch it. We cannot do anything with the line. That is the case in real life also, right? You face so many bad people. You cannot say anything to them. So how can you reduce the effect of that bad person? What that bad person does to you?
By ignoring it, giving it back.
Yeah, by ignoring it. And how can you ignore it? You cannot be empty, right? You have to suppose something is worrying you a lot because you're small to understand this because you haven't gotten into the worry part. But as you suppose somebody is losing a job, that is the most worrisome to people, particularly in the United States, because everything is connected to job. The whole life revolves around the job in the United States. So if somebody is losing a job, that becomes the highest priority. It makes you so sad. Now, how can you get over the sadness? By ignoring. And can you ignore it just like that? No, because it keeps on pulling you down. So what should you do?
Maybe I do stuff.
Right? Or make something else more important. So if there's a line, to make that line short, what you can do is draw a bigger line beside it. When you draw a bigger line, this line automatically becomes short, right? So that's what we do in life also. When something is troubling us, make that trouble shorter by drawing a bigger line. So what are the two bigger lines that God told us? One is Lord Krishna's way, knowledge. Think a lot about life. Think a lot about who am I? I'm the soul. Nothing can harm me. If you keep on thinking that and get all the knowledge about soul and God and everything, the weight that you give to these small things will automatically go down. Right? Other way is given by Lord Buddha. Meditation. Make breath the most important. See now people are evacuating, right? They are losing homes, they are going and all that stuff. See, it takes a lifetime to build a home, and if they lose it to the fires and whatever, so their life is all gone, right? So, but they should not think like that, right? They assign, they do not intelligent people do not assign too much weightage to the house by various ways. So the best way to reduce the weights is by knowledge that Lord Krishna gave us, or through meditation that Lord Buddha gave us. In meditation, you make the breath the most important thing in life and focus on it. In Krishna's way, you make knowledge the most important thing and go deepest into the knowledge, deepest of the deep knowledge. So these are the two ways to reduce weights. But in machine learning, a similar process is called as regularization. It is called regularization. In regularization also, what we do is we have this loss function, right? Loss function is a mathematical function, right? You add another function to it, just like we add a bigger line. You add another function to it, and the weights will automatically get reduced. So same thing in real life, in machine learning, it's the same thing. We want the weights to be less. So the other kind of knowledge is the divine knowledge. You keep on thinking about God. God is supreme, right? So keep on thinking about God. What will happen? If you give the most importance to God, God is also often taken for granted. Right? We never see Him. So we just take Him for granted. So give the most importance to God in every aspect of your life. Leave everything to God. If you lose job, then think that God is going to somehow take care of you. Right? That's the attitude. So that is the reason why God is called Hari. Hari means reduce, regularize, reduce. Uh, Vishnu is called Hari and Shiva is called Hara. Both mean the same. They reduce the weights in the real world. Your biases get reduced. When you keep on thinking about God or thinking about the knowledge that Lord Krishna gave, or meditate like Lord Buddha told us, all of these things will help you reduce weights, reduce biases, right? So is that clear? So machine learning and Bhagavad Gita, there's a lot of similarity. Uh, because Bhagavad Gita is also learning, and machine learning is also how machines learn. In fact, in regularization, we choose functions. We remember we add a function, right? The existing function, we add another function. So we choose functions which make the weights almost zero, either zero or almost zero. We typically look at functions which can reduce the weights to zero or almost zero. So the same thing in real life. You should not have too many favorites, too many loves, too many likes, too many hates. You reduce the weight. The weight should be almost zero for most of the aspects. A few aspects have to be given most important. Like God is one, um, and knowledge is another, and meditation, this kind of things. So another example of giving too many weights to too many things, right? So water is very clear to start with, right? When you put a lot of stuff into it, what happens to water?
It gets hung.
Yeah, it gets muddled, right? It loses its purity. The same thing with mind. When mind focuses solely on breath, just the breath, or mind focuses solely on God, then the mind is very clear, right? That's why when you meditate before sleeping, you meditate for 30 minutes before sleeping, and you wake up, you feel very fresh because the mind is completely clear. All confusion is cleared up. Through the night, the mind keeps on meditating unconsciously, without you knowing. The mind keeps on meditating, and then in the morning, the mind is completely clear. That's why it's very important to meditate for 30 minutes or as much as you can before you sleep. Um, so, by doing that, the weights or the biases that are there in your mind will become zeros. They reduce through meditation, right? So, if you give too many weights to too many things in the mind, your mind becomes muddled. Just like you put a lot of stuff into the water, it becomes muddled. The mind also becomes muddled. That's why focus on few things, and other things give less importance. So many people go for these silence courses. There is a course called silence course. Some gurus offer that. So in the silence course, what happens is that you just remain silent. You don't do anything. So people put their finger on mouth and then remain silent the whole day, but their mind keeps on thinking about various things. Then it's of no use. Silence means silence of the mind. Silence does not mean silence of just the word. It also means silence of the mind. That's why during when I was small, we used to observe silence vratas, mauna vratas. So we wouldn't talk for a day or two. It's like a vow that we take. We are not going to talk for the whole day to anyone. So the idea there is to clear your mind. When you talk, when you keep on talking, you keep on getting ideas in your mind. When your mind keeps on thinking, when you put a lot of stuff in the mind gets muddled, just like the water gets muddled. And when the mind is confused, you cannot do anything right, right? So that is the reason why when I was small, I did it a few times. When I was small, I used to undertake. It used to be difficult because I was a small kid that time, but we still used to do that. Remain silent for the whole day. The idea behind that is when you are silent, the thoughts go down. When there's no need to talk, your thought process automatically comes down. But it also means that you should also try to bring down the thoughts in your mind. That is what silence means. So we talked about overfitting in the last class also. Overfitting also means narrow-mindedness, and regularization can be thought of as openness. Right? Reducing the weights is openness. Narrow-mindedness, we talked about how a girl who gets married and goes to a new home has trouble. Why? Because she's so used, she has attached so much weightage to what she has learned in her mother's place, in her parents' place. So in our parents' place, there used to be a lot of parties and people hardly used to work and all that stuff. So that kind of life became really prominent for this girl. She gave a lot of weight to that. So when she goes to a boy whose life was full of hard work and difficulties and all that, the girl feels out of place because she has attached a lot of weight to the few things that she has seen in her parents' place. So that is overfitting, learning from very few data, very few patterns she has observed, and she got so much used to it, right? So in real world, it is called narrow-mindedness. Regularization is openness. So when the weights are small, you don't attach. It's okay. It's okay. I mean, we don't need to have parties every week. That's okay. That's what you're going to say. But if you attach too much weight to the party life, then you would say the girl or the boy would argue with spouse. We are not even calling anyone to our home. No fun, nothing. All the time, work, 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 work. Yeah, I'm really fed up of this life and all that stuff. Right? That's what happens. But if you give very little importance to party life and you're open to new kind of life, your life is happy, right? You get adjusted with new people, And so that is the reason why openness or regularization, machine learning language is called regularization. So it is very, very important. Regularization uh, in machine learning is important, and regularization in real life is also very important, right? So you see the analogy. Analogy means similarity between real life learning and machine learning. Machines learn the similar way as we learn, right? Okay, so this is the book that I preserved for more than 3 decades, 30 years, more than 30 years have been safeguarding it, right? Um, this is from a uh, ashram called Ramakrishna Ashram. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa was a guru. He is the guru of Vivekananda, Swami Vivekananda, right? So he started many ashrams. I went to his original ashram also in Calcutta. It is in Calcutta, but there is one in Hyderabad also. So it's a beautiful place. I really used to love to go there when I was small. So these Swamis like this Swami Chidananda, they're highly intellectual. Um, they're just because they're Swamijis doesn't mean that they're not. Uh, they don't know anything. Like Buddha was a prince. He knew so much, but he was like a Swami. He was like a what do you call that? Monk, right? These people are really intelligent. In fact, most of the Swamis in our culture are very intelligent. Uh, the high school topper in our school when I was studying, the one who got the best point, the best rank, he was number one in the entire school. Um, he was a topper in medicine entrance also. He became a doctor. And then, can you guess what he did later? He just joined this Ramakrishna ashram. He did not, these Swamijis do not marry, they do not have a family life. They just have to live very frugally on just like one cloth and things like that, and spend all their life in knowledge. So he gave up everything and joined Ramakrishna ashram. So, and then most of the people like that, like there is an organization called these slides, these slokas are from a book published by ISKCON. See here, you can't see it probably. See, Krishna.com and this DIS headquarters.org. These are the websites of a what do you call a cult or a discipline that was started by Swami Prabhupada. So it's called ISKCON. And most of the people in this, it's also like the Ramakrishna Ashram. So they don't have a family life and they spend their lives in knowledge. So people in this kind of organization also are mostly from IITs. IITs are like top ranking schools in India, technology schools. So a lot of these people are actually from IITs. They are toppers in the entire country, and then because they are so much used to knowledge, so they want to continue in that knowledge process. They, and what is the ultimate knowledge in the world? The Vedas, the Bhagavad Gita. That's the ultimate knowledge. There's nothing beyond that knowledge. So that's why they from IITs, it's an automatically transition path to reach higher levels of knowledge. That's why they go for these kind of ashrams. Okay, any questions? Okay, then let us end the session with a sloka. Asatoma Satyamaya Tamasoma ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमय ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति